All right. Good afternoon, John.
Hey,
Donovan
Marty.
in Oceanside, California. Marty Keller here in Sacramento, California. It's our weekly intentional living podcast. It's always good to be with you. And gosh, we never seem to run out of things to talk about.
No, this is a prolific area of conversation.
Yeah, just being human. This being human thing
It's a human thing.
is always in motion.
Yes. And it's slippery.
It is slippery.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of it. That's the good news, as
Yep.
our friend Dan would say.
Mm-hmm.
That's the good news. So one of the things that I wanted to raise with you today is how we apply this accountability practice to our relationships. And there's a couple of items that have come up recently in some of our Rusty Nail meetings that I thought it might be worth revisiting in terms of the ideas behind these approaches and the practice, and how it is that I can use this practice to deepen my intimacy with other people.
Yeah.
And in particular, one of the things that came up was, and I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, so we're revisiting this, is how to have a difficult conversation. And in particular, dealing with when, let's say it's you and me, and you say something and I feel triggered or angry, or I have a sharp emotional response to it. And in my the story that I tell about it is you said something that pissed me off or hurt me or whatever it is. And in my old way of thinking, I would move toward just making you the bad guy and leaving myself as a victim.
Right.
And what our accountability practice urges us to do and supports us in doing is to flip that over and use the occasion of a trigger or an angry or a negative or a powerful response to something one of us says as an opportunity to review what's going on inside of me.
Right.
And so you had come up with something that you called a clearing statement. And I thought maybe we could start there, if you're open to it, to talk about how to use accountability in these instances and perhaps beyond to create vulnerability rather than distance from each other.
Okay. All right. Have you got a copy of that clearing statement?
Well, I believe I do.
Oh, good. If you can bring it up, then it'll help go through it. There it is. Oh my God.
And I got to tell you, John, since you gave this to us, I revised this a little bit.
I see that.
We put in number 5. And so maybe as you go through, because this mirrors pretty much the accountability tree.
Yeah. Wow. Excellent. Okay. So I got this template off of New Warriors, and they called it I statements. They wanted to make I statements. And to do clearings when they came together, they go to a weekend, initiation weekend, and then they have weekly groups where they can come and keep the energy, keep the information going, keep in contact with the concept of whatever they found out about themselves during the weekend. And they used this to clear. And the way they used it was use it like I statements. And a lot of I statements are disguised you statements.
Yeah.
Where I say, when you raise your voice, I feel scared. My judgment about that is that you're mean. And then what that says about me, they would go into a quality, or I'm setting healthy boundaries. And before it had the fifth one in there, which we'll get to, what I like or what I want is for you to stop. Well, that's an I statement. So
That's a you statement.
that's correct. That's a you statement disguised as an I statement.
Right.
I feel afraid, so you need to.
Right.
So what I've done is have all these questions talk to me about what I want. So if I see, hear, or think, and one of those is the key part, when I see you or when I hear you yell, that's the data. That's just what's happening. And then I go to a feeling. I feel afraid, I feel angry, and then own the feeling. And then we go to the story about you're raising your voice. Is my judgment about you is that you're mean. And we would like to leave that, the people in that first started this would leave that there, as far as I know, and I may be wrong. And if somebody hears this and has a correction for me, I'm open to hearing it. When I project onto somebody, they're making me feel anything. No, what I know is I choose my feelings. You do what you want. You could scream and yell, or you could talk in a calm voice. The feeling I have is my choice. So I'm going to own the feeling. And then this number three, my judgment about that is you're mean. Well, I'm also going to own my projection. If I hear you yelling at me and I feel afraid, and I move to a healthy boundary, or I move to keep myself safe, there is no problem. We don't need this statement. If I continue to engage with you, or I try to make it about you, that's when this statement comes in handy for me to examine my own personal motivations. Okay. So let's say my judgment about that is that you're mean. And then what that says about me is, if I own that projection, is I'm mean. Because in intentional living accountability tree process, whatever we see in the other person, especially if we have energy around it, is always true about me. And it may be true about me in an area where it's coming from my subconscious, which I'm not aware of. It's not in my conscious thought. So when I say what that says about me is I'm mean, that's when the accountability tree process happens. And then I can either ask myself how I feel when I say that about me, or I could just simply experience the emotion that that truth initiates in my body. So what that says about me is I'm mean. And then I could feel this, I could realize that a lot of the things that motivate my behavior in relationships is mean and coercive. And then I would, when I go to the last one, I would like, it's not what I want you to do. What would I like for myself?
Right.
I want to be able to set healthy boundaries. I want to be kind. And we haven't done that yet, and we'll probably add that to it now. I intend to be kind, or I intend to set healthy boundaries, or I intend to be assertive rather than aggressive. And that gives me recourse. That's pro-action for me. Me wanting you to change is the definition of codependency and control. So that's in a nutshell. And we'll go over this again. And people hearing this for the first time, it may have been difficult to follow. It's difficult to follow if you've been doing this practice for a while. So we'll go over it again. This is a written out version, like you said, of owning my projections, accountability tree process. I mean, feel that. You can name the feeling. You don't have to, because your body remembers when it hears the truth. coming from your subconscious. There's an alignment with the energy that motivated the meanness, and things come to you. Just feelings come to you, or inspiration, or ideas about, oh my God, when I did this, that in this situation, I was hella mean. And then okay, it is my intent to be kind, or I want to be kind, or I want to forgive, or I want to be forgiving, or I want to forgive myself, or I want to be gracious, whatever the attribute that I'm seeing that I don't have that I want. So I intend to be gracious.
Right. So a couple of things that I'd like to explore a little more in depth. First of all, before we do that, can you share with us why this is called a clearing statement? What's the clearing going on?
It's getting clear about my motivations or my participation in whatever event's going on. It's like if I'm experiencing somebody who's what we might call in this society rude, or aggressive, or demeaning, and I'm not taking proaction or seeing to my own benefit, I'm in a family of origin dysfunction trait, or coming from a childhood trauma that is the reactionary fight, flight, freeze, please mode, and I'm not in the present moment. So this clears the another way to say it is that I become lucid in the moment. I recognize myself in present moment, present time. I recognize the situation. I'm at a meeting with people with the purpose of healing. And then I see the other person as not the aggressor or the monster or the attacker or the one perpetrating on me. I see them as I am struggling. And I ask for what I need, which is usually, for me, it's patience. I intend to be kind. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, what I'm hearing is we actually can use the word clear here in two different senses. Number one is to get clarity, clearing things up.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two, to clear out energy that's in my way of what's really going on.
Yes, exactly. Is clear up a channel for us creating a relationship and or being together in the same space and participating in a process that is bigger than us.
So I'd like to share the experience that we had on Monday night, but with keeping confidentiality. So I'm not going to name any names or talk about specifics, but I want to talk about what we learned.
Okay.
And what we learned was it would have been better to preface this statement with a request to the person about whom the first person was sharing, to ask permission to share this clearing statement.
Right. Yeah. And when I use this in a group process, somebody say, I want to do a clearing. And I said, well, is that person in the room? And if that person's in the room, I say, okay, we need to ask that person permission to do this. And then ask that person if he's willing to hear something that appears to be about him. And if he'd be willing to participate in this difficult process.
And we didn't do that. And as a result
Right.
of not doing that, the person felt ambushed.
Yes.
And so what we learned, and the shared learning we got, was we should have, it might have been better, I hate using should, but it might have been better to directly address the person to begin with.
Yes. Ask permission. And then we wait for the yes, no, or maybe.
Right. And then if the person says no, we don't do the clearing statement.
You don't do the clearing.
Right.
They've said, and no is a complete sentence. They don't need to offer any explanation. No means no.
Right. So the other thing that I'd like to point out in to those who are considering using this process, that even if the second person agrees to this, the second person may not be able to hear this in an objective or non-personal way.
Right.
And so the opportunity then is for the second person to then go through this process or through accountability
Yep.
to check in on his or her own feelings,
Right.
beliefs, fears, because that way the same opportunity is afforded the second person to get clear about what's going on with him or her.
Correct.
So for me, the power of this process, and it's not always easy because when people are in the room together, I could literally feel the emotions flowing like a fountain.
Yes.
Or like maybe a fountain is too benign an image, more like a rapid in the river.
Yes.
And I, as a facilitator, I could actually feel the energy of like being at my dining room table as a 5-year-old and listening to my parents yell at each other.
Yes.
And so it is very powerful when we can identify what's going on with us and state our own data,
Mm-hmm.
and then be able to use the accountability practice to go through that toward what we want.
Yeah.
And for me, the power of doing that in the group is that all those who are not directly involved in the dialogue are still holding the space for everyone who is involved in it to work through it and come through it in a way that's healthy and is building toward intimacy rather than falling back on the old ways of being.
Yes. Yeah. And another thing I do too is talk about that, own your projections and core constants of relationships, that whatever you're projecting onto me isn't me. It may be, but until that person asks me, they don't know. If I project onto somebody, they're aggressive. Well, that may be true. That's my perception. So I know aggressive. I know what aggressive looks like. I've been aggressive. So, and then if I see that as aggressive, that's my issue. And if I can feel that and I can stay in my center, then there's no reason for me to process it because, oh, that's aggressive. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm safe. This person isn't going to harm me. And then dialogue with that person about what I'm feeling. I'm feeling afraid, or I'm feeling dismissed or invalidated. And then see what happens. When I stay out of myself, I get high energy, or even if I get low energy, that speaks to my wounding. If I address the situation, say a situation on the intensity scale is a 7, and I'm addressing this thing in a healthy 7, then whatever's over there, I've worked on it and come to reconcile inside myself. Like if somebody calls me a liar and they're heated, oh, you're a liar. And I go, wow, yeah, I'm working on that. I know that there's sometimes I don't tell the truth, and I'm okay with that. And then I'm still in dialogue with the other person. Then that's something I have reconciled. That's something I've worked on already. And there may or may not be a need for me to work on depending on my level of engagement. If somebody calls me a liar and I go right to 9, then there's something in that I'm holding on myself, internal, in the subconscious, which I'm not aware of. The intensity tells me it's in there. Otherwise, if there was no intensity, I would just say, well, yeah, I'm sorry you see that, and I will look at that and I'll check. Yeah. And stay engaged. and a lot of times we're talking about this in the room, but most of the time this happens in a significant relationship.
Well, that's part of the reason I thought we would explain that, because this, you know, we talked about the example that we were using just now was in a group setting, but
Right.
as you said earlier, it often tends to be that I'm more likely to be triggered by the people I love than
Yes.
strangers or mere acquaintances.
Yeah. Yep. So in the relationships I had, if the person I was in relationship did not have this information, I would what I call front load the information. So if I was going to go into a clearing statement, I would explain to them what I'm doing so they didn't have to guess. I remember my wife one time, I said, I want to be accountable for the behavior. And she said, I don't want to hear your accountability bubblehead stuff. I want you to say, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, that'll work if that's what she wants. And then I did the process internally in myself. A lot of what we're learning in intentional living is called therapeutic language. So after a while, you don't have to have, I do not have to have therapeutic language, because my sorry has accountability, the frequency of accountability in it. And I can say I'm sorry and know that I'm accountable. I did that. It is my intent to be gentle, or is my intent to be kind, or is my intent to be calm. So at first, though, we're using these guidelines, clearing statement, own your projections, accountability tree, say the truth. That's all therapeutic language. And after I've built this practice over a while, I don't have to think of the steps. I'm living the steps. I'm actually in the movement of accountability, and it's fluid, and it's using what I want to call, regular language with people I know that don't know any of this jargon or accountability tree or what I'm talking about. So, and for me to use that on somebody who doesn't have that information is violent. Is just say, oh, you need to be accountable. Well, no, they don't. They don't have to do anything. If I choose to be accountable, that's on me. I can do it inside me, or I can do it out loud. And I front load with the person what I'm doing, or I just do the conventional thing. I'm sorry. And maybe ask if you want to hear me be accountable, and then listen for their answer. So
Let's talk a little bit about the emotional energetics of this.
Okay.
Because it's important, I think, to let us know as we can contemplate doing this kind of work, that there is likely to be an emotional energy that goes with it. And what I want to address for myself is that when I first started learning to do this practice, that I had to deal with significant feelings of shame. And what I've come to learn about myself and my own process is that shame is the feeling I least want to feel.
Right.
And so to be accountable to another person for something that I'm projecting onto that person often feels shameful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have found it difficult to go there. And I find myself reluctant to go there because I know what's coming in terms of feeling. And the more I do this work, then of course, the more I recognize that no, this is probably a good thing to do, to experience this. But initially, when we start undertaking to do this work, even as we do it with other people who may be quite conversant with the language, as you were saying, it's still, I think, important to point out that there's going to be, there's likely going to be some emotions that we're not used to. and that I felt incumbent upon me to summon up my courage to do it anyway.
Mhm. Here's what I've come to understand, that when we're in a reactive mode, it's the fight, flight, freeze, please. And that reactive mode comes up when somebody either asks a question or makes an accusation, or we're confronted with the truth. That is adrenaline in my body.
Right.
Now, adrenaline mimics emotion. So my palms get sweaty, my heart races. That's actually, with adrenaline in my body, that's actually the absence of emotion. It's also the absence of clarity about where I'm at, situation, and the availability for me to see the other person. They become the monster, the attacker, the one that's trying to do me harm. And I've experienced this specifically in the jails, where I would tell people to take a breath and feel your emotions. And they would say to me, you do not want to see me when I'm angry. And I got, what I'm hearing them say, and what I know from my own experiences, that what I had anger equated to was the violent behavior that I did from my fight, flight, freeze, please, which was the absence of emotion, into a reactive state. We, the language we use in this society, we sanction violence, and we call it anger. And it's a travesty. I don't know how to say this, but it's a mix-up that is tragic. And what I tell people is, if what I would like for you is to notice feeling of anger, which is a sense of injustice. All emotions, including anger, are information, welling of information and energy that allows me to connect to myself and the other person that's in front of me. So I could be standing in front of you and be enraged, and it's about connection. It's not about separation or harm. These guys would, come in every week and be accountable for whatever violence they did. And they would say, I had they called it fatal peril moment, or a fight, flight, freeze, please moment. And then they went into whatever the emotional, verbal, or physical violence was. They owned the violence and said, they remake their agreement to be nonviolent. In intentional living, it's, I just dismissed you. It was my violence, because that's emotionally coercive and violent. My dismissing you is the lack of emotions. If I'm feeling scared and I lash out at you, and I assault you emotionally or verbally, that's violence. That's a behavior. If I'm feeling scared and I say to you, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm afraid of you right now, that's the emotion of fear. Or I'm angry with you right now. I feel like there's something about to happen, or you just crossed a boundary and I need you to stop. See, the anger, the actual feeling of emotion, connects me to me, and then gives me the availability to connect to the person in front of me. When I disconnect through a violent or coercive behavior, adrenaline, fight, flight, freeze, please. It's a reaction from the family of origin dysfunction information, childhood trauma information. It's in the subconscious. And I'm willing to say that again, because I know this is confusing. I've been in groups of men where somebody has asked me, I want to work on my anger. I don't want to be so angry. And I just told him, I said, well, I can't help you with that. What I would like to help you with is for you to notice, embrace, and express your anger without violence. And they look stunned. They look like, what are you talking about? Because it's so ingrained in us that the dismissal, the diminishing, threatening, raising my voice, they've made that the anger. That's the definition of anger, is violent behavior. And we've made those two things synonymous. So now it's hard just getting what's an emotion, what's violent, what's a behavior, what's an emotion. And the clearing statement helps me identify me separate from my behavior. The accountability tree process enables me to identify me separate from my behavior. Not that I didn't do the behavior. If I did the behavior and it's a behavior, I have volition to change it. If I was angry and that's me, I'm screwed. I have no recourse because anger comes spontaneously, organically out of the blue. How am I going to control that? It's like, well, actually, that's what I don't want people to do. I want them to feel their anger, which is a sense of injustice, of harm to me or others, and then express that sense of injustice, not hit, verbally abuse or emotionally abuse somebody.
Not to retaliate.
Not to retaliate. And that's what the behavior is, the violent behavior is.
So thanks for that. And I can't help but wonder if we get confused about this issue because the feeling of anger and the feeling of raised adrenaline are awfully close to one another.
Yes, yes.
And so what I got trained to do, and I learned this from my old man, is anger almost always included some kind of violent behavior.
Yes.
And so I don't know that I ever got to see anger without violent behavior as part of it. So I didn't learn that one could be angry without letting that adrenaline coursing through my body result in me doing something physical or emotional, yelling at somebody, calling a name. I just remember so vividly in my family, there was always the grabbing of the arm and the gritting of the teeth and the saying something violently negative.
Yes.
Like, you little prick, or you stupid kid, or something like that. And the gritted teeth always communicated to me that something worse could be happening, except that the parent was holding himself or herself back.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, I am not safe here.
Okay. Here's what I've ciphered out of this, my own experience of violent behavior. My violence very rarely came from the emotion of anger. It came from the absence of emotion, and it was resentment, bitterness, and contempt that I was either holding on myself, like I'm stupid, or people are out to get me. And that violent behavior was the strong arm of control, keeping people away or doing the right thing the right way. And it had nothing to do with anger. I remember a violent outburst, and I was enjoying something. I can't remember the situation, but it dawned on me that I wasn't angry. I was like, you're messing with my free time. That's resentment. That's entitlement. That's arrogance. It has nothing to do with anger at all. It was, you're bothering me. And I wasn't angry. I was just, how dare you? That's that's a sense of entitlement and an arrogance. And then we still called it anger. Oh, you're angry. Well, okay, yeah, don't mess with me. You know, if you don't want to see me angry, just leave me alone. Which has nothing to do with an injustice, or has nothing to do with harm coming to me. Somebody may have asked me a question that I didn't want to answer at the time, or I thought was intrusive or a setup. And that all comes from family of origin dysfunction, childhood trauma, in a hypervigilant state, wondering when's the next shoe going to drop, who's going to throw the next punch or shoot the next arrow or throw the grenade or take a pot shot. I mean, all that language is battlefield language. It's not in the hearth home loving you language, but I use that language. Oh, you took a pot shot at me, or you try to emasculate me, or all you do is just see the bad in me and attack me. Oh, okay, no. So this is very convoluted. I'm really glad though, Marty, that we're having this conversation, because this language and how we use language and these terms and the definition of anger specifically, it's systemic. We have, the last time I heard was probably 10, 12 years ago, 2.2 million people in the United States behind bars in prison. Are you kidding me? And we're calling them angry men. Well, I want to offer, no, they're wounded men. They're resentful, bitter, and full of contempt. Yes. Angry, no. I actually went into the jail and told these guys, I want you to experience and embrace your anger and see what happens. And it was like, they all just like, no. Because they have anger equated to violence. It's synonymous. It's anger has nothing to do with violence. Any emotion, happy, content, afraid, sad, hurt, is the information pre-behavior. All emotion, including anger. I have a sense of an injustice. I see an injustice. Or you're stepping on my toe. It hurts. Please back off. That's anger. And it's a feeling tone internally. And it's situational. I don't know. This is.
Well,
I'm gonna stop.
I feel the need to rescue you, John. Family of origin, people pleasing. No, I think it's worth wrestling with this because it is difficult. So even in the example that you used a few minutes ago, I'm watching TV and you're interrupting me. What would prevent me from seeing that as something that an injustice is being done on my leisure time?
Well, actually, but if you were in a loving relationship and or a parent of a child, your concern is more for the safety of the hearth in the home than it is for whatever football game. And for me, it was football or baseball or some movie.
It doesn't matter what it was.
To numb out because I was full of resentment, bitterness, and contempt.
Right.
Instead of now, see, and this is that reticular activating system we talk about. It filters out non-essential information based on what my focus is. So if I am focused on the TV and somebody asks me questions, I either don't hear it or dismiss it. Non-essential to my task, which is watching this TV show.
Right.
And now when somebody in my household that I care about, I hear something, I actually turn from that to them because I know I have a reticular activating system that's going to filter out what they say. And if I don't look at them, pay attention to them, that mechanism is in place and they'll ask me something or say something. And I go, yeah, and not even hear what they said. And what that tells them is they're not important to me. Well, you know what? To me, they are important to me now. So I know what this reticular activating system filters out. So if I'm doing something and I hear over here, I actually shift position to move my whole reticular activating system into their field. So what they're doing becomes essential to my well-being and what I want. Before I didn't know this was happening, I just saw it as like, what are you doing? If anybody is listening to this Zoom podcast, not Zoom, but podcast, has been accused of selective hearing, I want to tell you that you have selective hearing. Every human being on the planet has selective hearing. That's the way we're built as human beings, to allow us to complete a task. And at first it was developed in our physiology for food, shelter, clothing. Because if we got distracted from food, shelter, clothing, we didn't survive. So the body created this mechanism that kept us on task so that we would survive. We're not in a cave, nor do we have saber-toothed tigers chasing us anymore. This mechanism is still in place. If we don't know it, we're handicapped. I know it, so I pay attention and I shift because I want to let the people around me know that they're more important than whatever might be on that TV or whatever I may be working on, and or could be a project in the garage, could be whatever.
Okay. Now I'm feeling angry.
Okay.
Well, because it's like this, I know that you're onto something here
Yes.
and I'm not getting it.
Ah,
And so I'm feeling something, frustration,
okay.
something, I feel an energy about it. And what I notice is that the energy leads to my wanting to make you wrong because you're not explaining it right.
Correct.
And so it's like, okay, I know that's not really the case, but I just wanted to share with people watching this thing how we're really looking for something, we're looking to appreciate something that's really subtle.
Yes.
From my perspective. I don't know
Yep.
from you, but for me, the distinction between anger and resentment as a feeling state must be very subtle, because I'm feeling it and I can't detect the injustice. So there's something else going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just in the inquiry at this point.
Okay. So my resentment, bitterness, contempt came from my childhood. When my dad set me down in the chair in the front room and said, "You're the shame of the family," and I had no recourse. So there's resentment built into me. Or when,
But how is, I'm sorry to interrupt, but how is that not also simultaneously an injustice being done?
well, it is an injustice.
Yeah.
And if I could have tapped into my anger, I would have said to him, "How dare you? How dare you say that to me?"
Right.
But I didn't have the wherewithal. And what we're
Okay,
doing
so what I'm hearing you say is, in that instance, when we're little kids and we're having this emotional violence being wreaked upon us,
yes,
that we're unable to express the anger that we're feeling,
yes,
and the repression of that anger is what becomes bitterness and resentment.
yes.
Okay, but it
And we
feels the
can't,
same.
yeah, it does. Well, that's what I'm telling you. The
Yeah.
adrenaline mimics the emotion,
Yeah.
because my heart starts racing. I feel flush. My palms are sweaty. I'm like hypersensitive. I'm watching every look. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's confusing.
Well, also, I'm thinking in that case of us little boys, that's also got terror mixed up in it.
Exactly. And that terror has a different quality, a different taste in the resentment.
Yeah.
So the resentment is myriad and it comes from all over, and somebody simply burns my toast, and I use that as an example, and I'm flying off the handle.
Yeah.
Okay, that's resentment. And it's that response is appropriate for somebody throwing a knife at me. okay, yeah, I get it. You know, like stop that. You know, yeah, and maybe even become violent back, because I'm not saying don't be violent.
Right,
I'm saying the behavior is violent. It's not anger.
right.
Um, so yeah, it's very convoluted
Well,
and
go
and
ahead.
reinforced by our society. We even created a whole institution, anger management, and they were talking about violent behavior that had nothing to do with anger. I remember experiencing my anger, and I thought, that made me angry. It's like, are you kidding me? It's like I had to, and I stood up. I was proactive, and I didn't want to hurt anybody. I was firm. I believe this is what one of my first experiences of being assertive instead of aggressive. That is not okay. I am not participating in this. That those statements come out of a welling of anger. Like, no, this is not okay. Most of my behavior was screw you, you're an idiot. No, that's not true. Defensive. And what I understand, that came out of unresolved trauma, which created resentment, bitterness, and contempt upon layer of resentment,
Right.
bitterness, and contempt.
Yes, and I specialized in passive aggressive, which was I'll show you and you won't even know where it came from.
Exactly. Right. I'll say this with a smile on my face, and when you
Right,
get hurt, I'll make fun of you because you're stupid.
right,
Something wrong with you. Yes.
right. So let's, just for fun, let's bring this back full circle to the clearing statement.
Mhm.
And let's talk about, if you're willing to, how can I use the clearing statement to express my anger or my resentment or my bitterness, whatever it is going on? Because it seems to
Um,
me it would be appropriate because it's all I statements.
the clearing statement is a practice of me taking ownership of my response to you
In relationship.
in relationship, and that's why it's one-on-one.
Right,
In the men's group, we use it. You know, I have to have a clearing with you, and somebody pick somebody else, and they'd say yes, no, maybe, and they knew that this was for the purpose of creating safety in the group, and they go through that process. Um, and I have refined it to fit the accountability tree process, where I take full accountability for my response.
right,
If somebody in a group is creating a disturbance and I move to some proactive action, no problem. It's been taken care of. I don't build more trauma, or I don't build more resentment. If somebody in the group does something and then I judge it or I name it, like, well, that's arrogant, that's on me. And coming to the end of my accountability rope is owning every instance that I found myself in that, which is exhaustive for me. And there are places in my life where I've come to the accountability rope, and it was in a certain relationship where I go, you know, I've done everything I can. This is what I need. And I was clear. And I didn't have to explain it. I didn't have to, no, I'm clean here. This is what I need for me to continue. And then I got the answer, which was no. Oh, that's clear. That was very clear. And I'm still coming to the end of my accountability rope on the rest of my childhood trauma. And I'm still learning as I teach about the insidiousness of the shadow, the subconscious pool of information that's still fighting to keep me alive for me to survive when it doesn't need to anymore. And clear out, another way to say this is clear out the baggage. And when I get to the end of that accountability rope, I'll let everybody know. because I'll be one happy man.
Well, and then I think we should have a party.
Say again?
I think we should have a party.
Yeah, I think we should have a party too. A big party.
I'd like to clarify a little bit about the accountability rope, because that's an issue that came up in one of our meetings as well. And so let me tell you what my understanding is and see how that coheres with what you were just implying. So I'm in a relationship with you, and I'm dealing with struggles. We have power struggles, we have communication struggles, whatever, and there's a lot of unhappiness going on. And the way I conceptualize the accountability rope is that whenever there is some unhappiness going on in a conversation or some kind of interaction that we have, my accountability invites me to always examine what's my role in producing this issue.
Yes.
And that when I get clarity about my role, then I can be accountable to my partner or my friend or my family, whatever, and tell the truth and set a new intention and say what I want.
Yeah.
And so coming to the end of my accountability rope, as I understand it, is that I have become conscious of every single thing I've done to contribute to the issues that we have between us, and I've cleared them all up. And there's nothing left. It's like I have no more issues here. And I'm still having unrest, and so I'm asking for what I want in the relationship. And the example that you use, and your partner said, I'm unwilling to give that. And that then you were free to take whatever action that you wanted because there wasn't any internal coercion or game playing going on in your own spirit or in your own truth. So that's why I think for those of you watching this, that John used the word exhaustive, because what I know is that without support from my sponsor or my group, I can still kid myself.
Yes.
And I can lie to myself about my accountability or the part I'm playing in some kind of disagreement or emotionally fraught situation between me and my partner or me and my friend or whatever. And so I think it's valuable to think about this from those of us that are in relationships and we're struggling, to have some commitment to the ruthlessness of this process. It's like, I can't be clear about what my partner's role in this is until I'm utterly clear about my own.
Exactly. Yeah. And that
if you're anything like me, there's a lot to clear up in there.
Yeah. And every time I do a clearing statement or I facilitate a clearing statement, there's a reframing of that, whoever's doing it, for myself or them, a reframing of that subconscious pool of information.
Right.
And the subconscious pool of information is the conditioning we got as infants, children, that is the default mode of my beliefs, perceptions, and patterns of behavior. And the only way to change the patterns of behavior or the beliefs or the perceptions is to address the default, the motherboard. And the motherboard is subconscious pool of information. Every time I go, that was arrogant on my part, or I'm mean, take a breath, realize that there's truth in that, if nothing more than the feeling or frequency that truth created in my body. Maybe some details, maybe not, but I have an inswelling of this emotion, energy, and it affects my body feeling tone. And then I say, it is my intent to be kind. It fuses with that energetically, shifts it, reframes it, and then sets it back down into my subconscious. I am, after 25 years of doing the accountability and 34 years of recovery, I still have a subconscious pool of information that is 7/8 of my experience in me. I still don't have access to it. And I can tell by the end result how much difference I've made in myself, according to what I say I want. I want to live a life of peace with an open heart, open mind. When I see myself in that life of peace, open heart, and mind, it's a validation that what I'm doing is working. If I see myself slip out of that open heart, open mind, it's a validation that there's something left. And I'm going in after it. That was mean, or that was flippant, or that was subtly corrosive. Okay, there it is again. It is my intent to be kind, and I'll be doing this until I don't need to do it anymore.
Well, isn't it the case that not only are we, when we do this, we're shuffling the configuration of the subconscious pool of information, but aren't we also reprogramming the reticular activating system?
Yes, we're giving it a new directive, a
Exactly.
new priority. Instead of my priority, me first, my TV, my house, I pay the bills, leave me alone, to me in the house with these people, creating an environment of safety and nurturing and loving space for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren. And yeah.
Yeah, because that's what I find is most, I don't know the right word, practical or obvious, is that certain things that used to pop up automatically in certain situations has shifted, and something else pops up that's related to intentions that I've set
Yes.
in this kind of emotional experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the most exciting aspect of this work is that I start noticing other things that I never noticed before that are the results of my intention showing up in the moment of acute emotional stress or triggering or whatever. It's like I have this other information show up that either wasn't there before or wasn't available, and now it is.
And an example of that was when I was explaining reticular activation, and you found yourself angry, and you just said it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, look at this. This is where I'm at.
Right.
And then our dialogue and our interchange continue. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I can't say I did that in order to illustrate that, but you're right.
No, but it was a very definitive illustration of that. Yes.
Well, I think that's the, you said, I think it was on our podcast last week about, everything starts with noting or noticing.
Yes.
And so that's part of what we do here in the work, is that we train ourselves, and that's the reticular activating system, to notice experiences in the moment that we may not have noticed in the past.
Exactly.
That we may have overlooked or dismissed or whatever, overridden with something else, like the idea of overriding anger with a violent behavior or with adrenaline experiences.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all extremely exciting, and I appreciate the time that we spent today taking a look at this idea of a clearing statement, which is a way of people who find themselves in some emotional difficulties to clear it up and get clarity on my part. So if I'm the one that's got the trigger, and you said something and I immediately got pissed off, scared, frightened, whatever it is, this clearing statement process is a way for me to ask, would you be willing to hear what I just experienced and a judgment I made about you that I'd like to withdraw?
Correct.
And then the person can say yes or no. And if the person says yes, then just walk through that process.
Then there's two people that have an opportunity to heal.
Exactly.
Yeah, very powerful.
Well, the other thing is that what we're doing is we're creating intimacy.
Yes. Oh
because I'm asking if you'll let me be vulnerable to your
Yes.
judgment,
Mhm.
or to your perhaps negative response to what I'm going to
Mhm.
say, or an emotionally powerful response that feels unhappy to me.
Right.
And that's the very definition of intimacy,
Yeah.
is the
When you
willingness to be vulnerable.
when you disclosed you were angry, I had just a little whiff of, oh my, and I go, oh no, it's not about me. It was like, and it was a
Yeah,
whiff, but it was there.
yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, as we come to the end of our time, as always, John,
Mhm.
before we ring off, I'd just like to let everyone know that we have a number of meetings that you can join us and learn to experience these processes for yourself. Monday night at 6:30, Tuesday at 4:30, Wednesday at 4,
I think.
Thursday nights 6:30. I'm gonna start losing count. And Saturday mornings at 8:30. These are all Pacific Daylight Time. That information on how to get in touch with me or John to get the Zoom addresses, that's all in Zoom, will be after the end of the podcast. So please feel invited to join any one of these meetings and check this work out for yourself. And with that, as always, just like to give you the last word, John.
You know, Marty, I appreciate you and your willingness for us to come together and live this process and exemplify, not only say what it is, but exemplify it in broad daylight. It's like really cool. Thank you.
In the light of day.
In the light of day.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to you.
Yes. And back at you, John. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.
I will.
And thank you very much.
You're welcome.